So I should kick off with, you can take the headphones off. I'll be speaking in English. So hopefully I'm the last one, so I'm glad you guys all stayed in this room. I should introduce myself by saying that I used to work at the IPR, and it was a great experience, and it did help me understand what happens in a city from the public sector side. Currently, I work at the Fraunhofer Institute in Stuttgart, and we do a lot of work with cities, and I do draw on my experiences from the IPR every day. So I'm here to talk about the holistic value model for nature-based solutions. This is a project. It was one of the last things that I, with the team here, did before I moved to Germany, was to get Prague into this UNALAB project, which is a SCC, so Smart Cities Communities Horizon 2020 project, SCC2, and we do look at nature-based solutions and their impact, or how nature-based solutions can be used to mitigate urban challenges of today. So Prague is a follower city in that project, and one of the key deliverables for which I'm responsible is the holistic value model. We call it that, so it looks like that in my head. Now, so we understand the value model as a way to quantify impacts of public spending on urban greenery, or we call it exogenous interventions, which is a significant refurbishment of a green park. And we are looking at different ways that we could leverage funding for of course the realization of the project, but also the operation. And so there are different aspects that we look at. We try to provide answers to situations where business as usual fails. And then we look at the benefits and the cost and the particular beneficiaries of these types of interventions. So when you do a significant investment into a park revitalization, like you're doing in Karlovo náměstí, then it is good to actually understand what kinds of impacts and multiplier effects that intervention creates. And what types of users you're affecting. And then on one hand, and this is a participatory approach, is you have a willingness to pay and a willingness to invest. What that means is that you do have significant stakeholders in the system. And on one hand, you have the private sector who might be willing to invest. And on the other hand, you would have a public sector who's willing to pay for particular types of interventions. I think a great example is what they've done in Eindhoven, where they were refurbishing streetlights, and they wanted to switch to lights that are LED and more environmentally friendly. And they gave a choice to a particular district. You can have the old lights, the old infrastructure with the new light bulbs, but they'll be more expensive, and you might have to partly pay for that. Or you can have new lights with less pleasing lampposts, and they'll be for free. And it was amazing to actually see that the overwhelming majority of the local population actually voted to have aesthetically more pleasing lampposts and actually financially participate on the better quality, so to say, of that public space. And of course, we should understand the context of national and international funding. Now, what we're doing is that we're trying to establish a clean link between the different businesses that happen in a particular area and the actual value that is created. And so the values that we need to understand have different characteristics. You have direct, indirect, and induced values, and direct, indirect benefits and particular beneficiaries. And I think behind each intervention, there should be a particular funding model. And I don't think in the day-to-day, when we're dealing with very complex systems and very complex cities, I mean, refurbishing a park is not an easy thing to do if you want to do it well. It is to really engage with all your key players that actually might want to be participating financially on that intervention. And I think bringing them to the table as soon as possible is a great way to go forward. And I'm glad that the representative here from the owners of the properties adjacent to the park was here today, and when we did get to discuss these types of things, because one of the dimensions of that park is not only a place to relax, it's not only a place to go with your dog, but it's also a place to do business. Lots of time people do and have lunch or a sandwich in parks and do business, have meetings and so forth. And I think we should understand that place in that dimension as well. And I think that it gets often forgotten. What is this? Yes, so basically, the key point, and we talked about the health value, so I'm not going to repeat some of the presentations that already touched upon this. The point is to understand how we understand the different sources of potential capital and how we can actually aggregate the different returns on investment, be it from social, environmental, or economic benefits. This slide talks a little bit, I mean, I'm really sorry, there's way too much wording on this, and it's too late to be going through all the different points. The slides kind of actually explains this methodology behind the willingness to pay and the willingness to invest. On one hand, you do have the public sector, and people actually voting on what they might be willing to financially participate on funding, and on the other hand, you have the private sector, like the many companies that have offices here and that actually might want to financially contribute to a better park that actually suits the particular needs of their employees and of their clients and so forth. So essentially, what happens in the city? The free rider problem, and I think that's the kind of the key element that we need to understand in the context of investing into public space, is that you have lots of people taking part in a city on different urban activities, be it people driving through the main square, but actually causing significant negative externalities. And the idea for us, and that's the idea behind the value model, which is an instrument, I will present that in the next slide, is that we are trying to capture these negative externalities caused by congestion, health risks, health issues, limited mobility, taking up too much public space with cars. And how do we use that model to actually integrate some of these negative externalities? Is through this. I know it looks really complicated, but bear with me. So on one hand, you have the benefits of nature-based solutions, so a park, and there is a relatively low need for urban intervention. But on the other hand, you have negative externalities that can be mitigated by nature-based solutions, a park, and those negative externalities can be funded by taxing or by leveraging fees and levies on particular users of that urban space that are polluting it. So the idea is, if there is a funding gap, and there is, we should try to understand what are the different potential sources of capital, to see if we can leverage them to get a better place, to get a park that is co-funded, that it doesn't only depend on the Prague 2 district or the city, and to have more stakeholders actually financially engaged on investing into running and creating a common use place. This is a multiplier effect of planting an urban forest, but I mean, you can replace urban forest with a park. What that slide shows is that you do have series of impacts. You might have the impact on the runoff reduction. You might actually have better retail on streets and areas where there is high quality greenery, and people are 12% more likely to spend their money on a street where there are trees. You have better air quality. You have higher property values from 1 to 10%, even 15%. Thus, you have higher property taxes leveraged. You actually have lower levels of domestic violence in areas where there's greenery, and we talked about the mental effects of green. You have safer and sociable neighborhoods. And of course, on the other hand, you have savings on the household operation costs. So you have up to 3% savings on the particular heating, but also on cooling. And then again, an aggregate annual net benefit of one 20-year-old tree in an urban forest is actually 60 euros. So I think this is a fantastic example of what can one tree do to a city, and I do think that we should understand what the impact or the possible impact of this intervention in the city of Prague, of one of the main squares, to actually have on the rest of the city, and understand the larger dimensions of well, the value that it creates. The basis for the project is, on one hand, we have Tampere, Genoa, and Eindhoven. For each of these cities, we're developing these value models. And Prague will actually have an access to the instrument, and will be able to apply it, hopefully, to Karlovo náměstí or any other intervention that it actually ends up doing with public funding. Some of the other cities is Stavanger, Başakşehir from Turkey, Cannes or Castellón from Spain. So again, I mean, this is a summary, but the value model sits at the very core of understanding who your beneficiaries are, the end users. What are the costs associated with creating a high-quality green public space? And then what are the benefits that you create, and what are the funding sources that you can tap into to actually create a high-value open space? And this is what it could look like for Prague. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.